Today I'll be presenting my results, conclusion, and discussion on the death penalty. My study focused on two main research questions. The first one was, how does concern about wrongful convictions affect the support for the death penalty? And then the hypothesis for that one would be individuals more concerned about wrongful convictions will be less likely to support the death penalty. And then the second question was, how does awareness of racial bias affect support for the death penalty? And then the hypothesis for that one was individuals more aware of racial disparities will also be less likely to support the death penalty. I analyzed the data using chi-square test and SPSS to see if there were relationships between the variables, and I ended up running 3 different tests for it. For my first test, I looked at wrongful convictions and support for the death penalty. The results were statistically significant because the p-value was 0.001, which is lower than 0.05. This means there was a relationship between the variables. People who were more concerned about innocent people being executed were less likely to support the death penalty. And then this was the results from test 1. Overall, the data showed that support for the death penalty decreased as concern about wrongful convictions increased. And then for my second test, I looked at awareness of racial disparities involving colored executions and the support for the death penalty. The results were also statistically significant because the p-value was 0.003. This means awareness of racial disparities was related to lower support for the death penalty. And then this was the table from test 2. It shows the results from it. And then the findings suggest that people who were more aware of racial disparities were generally less supportive of the death penalty. And then for the third test, I looked at awareness of white execution statistics and support for the death penalty. The test was not statistically significant because the p-value was 0.637, which was higher than 0.05, which means there was not a strong relationship between these variables. This is the table that shows the results from test 3. Unlike the first 2 tests, this variable did not appear to affect support for the death penalty. The significance, we're finding support for previous research about wrongful convictions and death penalty attitudes. Racial disparities appear to influence public opinion. Fairness concerns remain important in death penalty research. Not all demographic awareness variables affected support equally. Fairness concerns may affect death penalty debates, and racial disparities remain an important issue. And then for my conclusion, concern about wrongful convictions and awareness of racial disparities both affected support for the death penalty. However, awareness of white execution statistics did not significantly affect support. Overall, fairness and racial concerns seem to play an important role in shaping opinions about the death penalty. My hypothesis was mostly supported because 2 tests showed a relationship, but 1 did not.